Association of Resident Doctors in Abuja asked the FCT minister to look beyond infrastructure development and consider the applied, calling themselves human abandoned projects that needs urgent intervention. And the federal government to kick off road transport palliative in a matter of hours, a day before Christmas, has designated locations across the country. Ask citizens to take advantage of the gesture for the Christmas and New Year. Hello and welcome to Politics Today, reaching you live from our global headquarters here in the nation's commercial nerve center. I'm Jeffrey Uzonga. Two broad things we will talk about today. One has to do with the student loan scheme, NEL Fund. And the president, in his presentation to the National Assembly a few days ago, when he did present that 49.7 trillion naira big budget in naira terms, not in dollar terms, to the joint session of the National Assembly in Abuja, he mentioned part of the initiative by the federal government that he feels has done quite well, one of which is the NEL Fund. And he talked about the fact that some monies have been disbursed and more monies are earmarked for that particular scheme. It's basically a scheme to support students, giving them loan. It's a legislation that came into being in the lifespan of this administration. So we'll be talking to the managing director of NEL Fund, Mr. Akintunde Sawyer, on the program. But on the other part of the program, we'll talk about issues around human rights. There's a lot that is going on, from the issue around Dele Farotimi against Are Afe Babalola and the policing between all of this that has to do with defamation. There's also the issue of the police saying if you curse someone, if you insult someone, issues around cyberbullying and cybercrime. We'll try to get the legal minds to explain what the limits are in terms of human rights, as well as the latitude, how far we can go in our human rights, and if indeed the system is shrinking civic space legally. Okay, but before all of that, let's tell you that the National Association of Resident Doctors in the Federal Capital Territory, they're asking the FCT Minister, Nyesom Wike, to clear 6 months of their salary arrears owed to members employed in 2023. While appreciating the Minister for his infrastructural development in the FCC since his emergence, the doctors say they consider themselves, in their words, an abandoned project that requires fixing. They asked Minister Nyesom Wike to urgently clear payment of medical residency training fund of 2024, review the bonding policy to 2 years instead of 6 years. Other demands by the doctors include enforcement of what they consider, or what they call implementation of skipping and issuance of skipping letters to the employed in 2023, immediate payment of accoutrement allowances for 2024, payment of outgoing 13 months hazard allowance arrears, and the FCTA management should also fast-track conversation of the resident doctors FCTA Post 2 members to consultant and expedite the process of employment of healthcare workers in order to buffer the manpower shortage in the nation's national hospital. So these are some of the demands by the resident doctors in Abuja to the FCT minister, saying, we thank you for what you're doing with infrastructure, everybody can see, but the people that run the health system, they need fixing as well. So that is their clear message to Nyesom Wike, the minister. But that's not all. The federal government, in the next few hours, is kicking off the 2024 Yuletide Road Transport Palliative. They said they have directed the leadership of all the road unions and private company partners to ensure their palliative buses are moved to designated loading points early on, that is 24th of December, which is tomorrow, early morning tomorrow, to move Nigerians who seek to take advantage of road transport to join their loved ones across the country. That's for Christmas and the New Year. Nigerians who intend to use this scheme, they said, will take off in Abuja, for instance, the Eagle Square by 6 a.m., while those in Lagos will take off at the Oshodi Terminal 3 for those going northern route and Oshodi Terminal 2 for those going southern part of the country. Now, they said time is around 6 a.m. Now, remember that all of this is not entirely free. The gesture is that 50% off the amount you were supposed to originally pay to whatever destination you're going to is what you'll be charged by the buses that have been provided by the federal government. So this is a kind of a gesture during the Yuletide. Okay, but these are not the only stories we're tracking for you. I've already given you a heads up as to our broad conversations. Today is going to be an interesting one, but first, let's bring you our political roundup stories.
The Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, is asking newly promoted officers of the Nigerian Army and the Nigerian Navy to defend the nation's democracy in addition to their core mandate of protecting the nation's integrity. General Musa gave the charge in Abuja at the declaration of newly promoted Army and Naval officers. He further tasked the officers to double their effort and bring an end to insurgency.
Having reached the peak of your careers, always remember that the Nigerian Army and the Armed Forces will continue to rely on the leadership and expertise of individuals like you to safeguard our country and its people. Nigeria is looking up to us. We must do everything to defend democracy in Nigeria.
And the House Committee on Ecological Funds has raised concerns about the inadequacy of resources allocated to address the growing ecological challenges facing states across Nigeria. The committee members expressed their dissatisfaction, stating that the current funding is insufficient to address the magnitude of problems they have observed. The chairman of the committee made the statement during a courtesy visit to Governor Bala Mohammed as part of the committee's oversight activities in Bauchi State. In his response, Governor Mohammed highlighted the severity of ecological issues, particularly in Bauchi North, and urged the federal government to explore additional funding options.
We are members of the Great Green Wall as a state participating in that project, and we are really saying that it is not working, because by now we should have provided the buffer with even our resources from local governments.
The Emeka Beke-led group of the All Progressives Congress in Rivers State has been reacting to Tony Okocha's group of the party, threatening to expel him from the APC. Addressing journalists in Port Harcourt, the party spokesman, Mr. Darlington Wauju, says his group remains a legitimate APC exco in the state, noting that no one can expel him. He also criticized the party's national chairman, Mr. Abdullahi Ganduje, accusing him of handing the party over to the FCT minister, who is in violation of the party's constitution.
We are worried that Alhaji Ganduje is doing everything possible to bully the very principles of progressivism upon which our party was founded.
And the Plateau State Police Command says it is enforcing a restriction between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. daily during the Yuletide. The command has also deployed its personnel to all the 17 local government areas of the state to ensure the peaceful Christmas and New Year celebrations.
Welcome back. Just before we get to the very first conversation we have that has to do with NELFund, and then we'll get to the issues of human rights, which is an important conversation that you should be part of on all sides. I've just been watching closely state government presenting budget, and I've seen loads of ambitious budget. But a concern, if you're a follower of the space and you understand a bit of the numbers and how these things work, something tells me that there's going to be a lot of indebtedness, even at the subnational level. The federal government is quite clear on its own that 13 trillion, I should say, is the deficit that will be funded by borrowing. Debt service alone in our budget for 2025 is 15 trillion naira, and we're generating about 34 trillion. So if you add recurrent expenditure and debt servicing, it almost gulls the entire 34 trillion that is expected as target revenue that will be generated by the federal government that will fill in the gap. But I've also seen states that I know, at least for 2023, did not generate, both by FAC allocation and IGRO, they don't generate up to 300 or 400 billion naira. And I'm seeing those states earmarking trillions of naira as their budget for 2025. Ambition is good, but realistic ambition maybe. And maybe one of these days, we're going to bring some of this budget and look at it critically and know how realistic or unrealistic some of these estimates are in terms of budgeting for the year 2025. Okay, but I just needed to get that off my chest as we we'll look at 2025. And part of the conversation has to do with the students' loan. We've been joined on the program by Mr. Akintunde Sawyer. He's the Managing Director of the Nigeria Education Loan Fund, NELFund. Mr. Sawyer, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on the program.
I know the last time we spoke, I can't remember, but quite a while ago, I did say that as the program continues, we will be bringing you in to give us update as to the progress so far. we know that when we engage government and throw things like the inflation is in a terrible shape, the economy is in a bad shape, they say, oh, we're in the right direction. And one of the first things that the federal government threw at us is the fact that, oh, look at NEL Fund, it's part of the initiative and all of that. So it looks like NEL Fund is one of the poster child or poster boy, if you will, of the success of this administration. So let's probe further. So far, so good. Maybe you can report to Nigerians the progress of the fund since you took over its management, or you're the pioneer and manager of the fund, by the way.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. And the first thing I should say is that, yes, indeed, the poster child, the poster boy of the administration is education, not necessarily just NEL Fund. And I think if you look at the most successful countries in the world, education has been the cornerstone of progress in any economy, in any socio-economic improvement that you see in any country. So it's not just about NEL Fund. It's about the fact that His Excellency, the President, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has focused on education. But in terms of your question as to the progress that's been made, as you know, this program was launched effectively for applications to be received on the 25th of May, 2024. Since then, we've made significant progress in terms of students wanting to apply for this fund. The demand has been phenomenal, given the amount of publicity that we've given to it. So, you know, something like 435,000 students have actually registered on the site. 330,000 have actually applied for the loan of that total number. We've had 128 institutions at tertiary level, that's universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education, that have actually received funds from us. We've disbursed somewhere in the region of 23 billion naira, 18 billion to institutions, and 5 billion for upkeep. And remember, the upkeep is paid monthly, so that figure's going up every month. We've actually ring-fenced those funds. So we're going to see something like 30 billion in total being dispersed for upkeep across the next 8 or 9 months or so. There are 94,000 students who are actually receiving this upkeep and who we've actually catered for. We're receiving applications at the rate of about 1,500 a day. So, you know, there's pent-up demand. Education is important in this country, and you're seeing it from the numbers that we're getting. And we're trying to be as transparent as possible, giving information freely. The president recognizes the importance of education, and we're trying to make sure that everybody else recognizes the same.
So that we can put it on record, I know you mentioned it in passing in case someone out there missed it. So how much, you said 23 billion has been disbursed. So how many students so far have been able to benefit from this 23 billion also?
So 94,000 students have benefited. So in other words, are beneficiaries of the funds that have been disbursed so far. And that figure is going up by about 1,500 a day. I'd say an average of about 1,300 a day are benefiting from this, either by direct disbursement to their institutions or receiving their upkeeps. Remember, the two things aren't necessarily flowing on the same day, but these are the sort of numbers that we're seeing. 94,000 students are benefiting directly today from receiving the 20,000 naira a month upkeep.
Yeah, because I needed you to be clear on that number, because listening to the president at the National Assembly when he was talking about NEL Fund, he mentioned 34 billion and 300,000 students. So we need clarity as to what is the fact here. The presentation he made, he was talking about 300,000 students benefiting 34 billion. So was that a mistake, or what exactly was he trying to say there?
Okay, so it's important to understand that once we receive an application, we ring-fence the funds for the students. So, you know, if you take, for example, the upkeep, what we're doing is that we're dispersing the upkeep on a monthly basis. Once we have allocated those funds as funds that are going to go to students, in our books, that is, those are funds that have been dispersed. But remember, we're disbursing monthly because the upkeep needs to come monthly. So the president's figures are entirely accurate. What he's referring to is the amount of money that we've disbursed into an account that's then flowing to the students. That money is committed and it's going to them. But as I say, it is staggered. And remember, we do have a situation in this country where even the beneficiaries in terms of the institutions themselves are receiving the funds at the beginning or in some cases in the middle of the session. So those figures are sort of staggered, but the funds have been allocated and in some cases ready to be disbursed, but it's certainly been put into a pot that directly goes to the institutions and to the beneficiaries. There's perhaps the discrepancy that you're seeing.
Okay, let's talk about the transparency in the process. Because the whole idea of the education fund, if I understand what the intention is all about, is to help students who cannot maybe pay fees and provide for their own upkeep. And now everything is literally done online for transparency and access to everyone. How do you ensure that the haves who don't need this don't come getting this money and deny those who don't have the money from getting this access?
Okay, that's a really good question. And you know, it's important to remember that means testing is relatively difficult in this environment. We know that we've got a high number of people who cannot pay their fees and who cannot afford tertiary education. Now, what we have done is ensure that we are targeting the institutions that we believe the majority of Nigerians who cannot afford to go abroad, who cannot afford to go to private institutions because they're so much more expensive, are the direct and initial recipients of this. So most of the applications are coming from the institutions that we're targeting and that by law we have to focus on. They are the federal government-owned tertiary institutions and the state government-owned tertiary institutions. That's where most of the people who need these loans are currently today. That's not to say that there may not be some on the private side. That's to say that we're using a broad brush at the moment to really determine those who need it. What the president has done is that he's made sure that NEL Fund is adequately funded to ensure that, you know, everyone is covered by this within the public tertiary institution space. As we go on, and I'm sure you would agree that with every system and every rollout, you learn as you go along. You collect more and more data on those who may need this more than others.
Oh, okay.
And more robustly. At the moment, we are treating and trying to ensure that this spreads as far and wide as possible. And we're looking specifically at students within the public sector-owned tertiary institutions. That's where the bulk of the people are.
All right, Mr. Sawyer. So let's look at some of the facts that you may be able to pick up as quickly as you can. Things like equitable distribution of this fund. For instance, there was a time when, at the very initial point, where students in the Southeast were raising concerns about this fund not getting to them, or I've forgotten the name the fund calls it now, more like, just allow me to use any name, just profiling the institution or the students to be able to get them to come on board. So how far has it gone? If you look at the 6 geopolitical zones, for instance, which are the highest benefiting zones and the least benefiting zones in your view, and why?
Okay. So look, a straight question deserves a straight answer. The highest benefiting zones from this loan scheme so far are mainly in the north. So the northern geopolitical zones have taken up the loan much more rapidly than the ones in the southwest, south, and southeast. However, when that came to light, and by the way, when it came to light, it wasn't students that highlighted it, it was other interest groups. What we did was that we ensured that we went and increased the level of sensitization in the south and in the southeast in particular. We began to engage more robustly and actively with the institution authorities. We began to sensitize and educate the students in those regions about the advantages of taking the loan. And what we have found is that they've been very receptive to that, and we've been receiving a lot more applications from the Southeast and the South-South. And what I mean by that, or what that translates to, is that there's a greater growth in the areas that perhaps didn't initially take it up. They're growing faster now in terms of the uptake than students in the North. So we're going to see an equalization of sorts happening fairly soon. We're investing a lot of time and effort in the areas that we didn't necessarily get them. The other thing I should highlight to you is that attitudes to taking loans differ across the country. Some cultures are more accepting of it, others are more suspicious or perhaps more reticent about taking loans. I think once we began to explain to the over 35,000 students that I and my team have been to visit directly, what the terms of these loans are: 0 interest, a moratorium of 2 years between, after they've completed their NYSC, which effectively shows that, we're going to give people time to find jobs. The fact that, nobody pays anything back to the loan fund until they have a job. And if they keep that job, then even then, it is the employer that is obliged to make the deductions and pay back to the fund. So that education process is going on, and it's being taken up very rapidly in the Southeast and in the South-South. And we're delighted with the results we're getting from that program.
So how much is the
thing I should mention?
Okay, go ahead. Just go ahead.
The other thing I should mention to you is that, if you look at this purely as a geographical exercise, then again, certainly the North seems to have the advantage. If you look at it as a state of origin exercise, you find that there are many students from the South-South and the Southeast who are studying in institutions in the North and who are applying. So the numbers are very different when you look at the states of origin than when you just look at the geography. However, it is important to look at the geography because of the investment going into the institutions.
That's a very good point you just raised. So let's find out how much exposure in terms of funding, how much is in the purse right now, if you can, and is ready for disbursement. The reason I asked that question, because in the piece of legislation that established NEL Fund, one of the reasons the government gave that it is not a grant and a fund is for the ability for it to be sustained, and giving loans to students will be based on funds that are available. How much do we have in the funds at the moment?
So what I can tell you is that we've got over 130 billion in the fund, and we've got some other funds that we're expecting literally within days to flow into the fund, and that would amount to another 70 or so odd billion. Beyond that, there are other funds that are earmarked. We get 1% of federal inland revenue collections, which are due to come, and that will probably come in at about 194 billion if our estimates are correct. But the point really here is that we are not short of funds. One of the things that the President Tinubu did, was to ensure that we were adequately funded. And you would have noticed, or you may be aware, that we even received funds from proceeds of crime a few months ago that amounted to about 50 billion. So in terms of funding, we're not concerned because the adequate provisions have been made. And as I say, it's well over 100 billion that we've got at the moment, and we're committed to dispersing, as of today, 108 billion naira, and we're very good for those funds.
I know that there are statutory agencies or agencies that are statutorily meant to contribute to the fund. I know the FIRS, which name will change, by the way, to National Revenue Service or Nigerian Revenue Service. That is, if the bill scales through, that is in the National Assembly. Can you walk us through and help us find out, or give us insight into how compliant have these agencies been in contributing their quota to the fund? I know you have lots of exposure right now. It's about distribution at the end of the day. So which are the agencies that are supposed to be contributing, and how well are they doing that?
So primarily, it's the FIRS that are the main funders of NEL Fund. And I can tell you, we have a great understanding with FIRS, and it's very clear that they're very supportive of what the statutes require them to do. We are not, expected to necessarily receive funds from other agencies. However, having said that, we have had great support from TED Fund, who've disbursed a certain amount of funds to us. We've had some funds appropriated. And, as I said to you a few moments ago, we've received funds from the proceeds of crime. So actually, from a statutory perspective, today it's the FIRS. However, there are other agencies of government that are seeding funds to NELFund to ensure that we're well and adequately catered for. What I will also say to you is that the law allows us to do a couple of other things. One is to raise funds from anywhere we can get it, as long as it's clean, it's legitimate, and it's clear what the intention of the donors might be, and it's acceptable to us. And the other thing is that we are empowered to invest the funds we have for a return so that we can begin to build in some sustainability in terms of having a robust investment plan. At the moment, we can only invest in government instruments. I think in the future, we will look to find ways of maximizing our return on investment if we're able to access other types of capital.
So are you saying by in extent, the funds can be invested in bonds and treasury bills? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying, yes.
Okay, that's quite a good one to bring to the fore, because a lot of people did not know that. We just felt that the money is coming and you distribute the money to all the students that need the money. But there's something I heard, I think I read somewhere, where the policy, an adjustment to the policy, that's why you're here to also explain whether that is correct or not. Is there like a preference now to the course of study of any student that is applying for this fund, or just about anybody, just like it was intended from the beginning, that anybody who is studying just about anything, as long as you meet the mark or the criteria for being a beneficiary, you could get this, or there's a review as to the courses that are prioritized?
Okay, so I know where that comment came from. So I spoke a couple of days ago on an online platform, and I was really extending to the public that, at the moment we are funding all courses. We are not discriminating against any course. A couple of things to bear in mind. We, first of all, have committed to funding the courses of all those who are currently in tertiary institutions from the time they apply for the fund to the end of their course, regardless of the course. However, it's important to appreciate that we're not doing education for education's sake. We're doing education, we're providing these loans for people so that they can have a realistic chance of getting a job. We're doing this partly so that we can make Nigeria more competitive in terms of its workforce. If you think back 30 years ago, shorthand was a very important thing for people to learn if they wanted to go into secretarial services. It's no longer relevant. One of the things that we absolutely must do is look at courses that are relevant to the advancement of our nation and that are sellable, or saleable if you like, for the individuals who are taking a loan to do the course. We're a responsible lender. We're going to lend funds to people to do things that are going to give them the most realistic chance of furthering their own lives, of being able to pay back, and for making our nation more competitive. It's important that you ask me this question because it must not be misunderstood. 45, 50 years ago, computer science was a relatively insignificant course in many institutions. Today, it's leading the world. The world is now technology focused. The countries that are doing best are those who caught on to that very early on. We're not going to lag behind. We're not going to be lending money to people just because we want to score political points. We have to think through this. We have to work together as a nation. We have to discuss what our nation needs, and we have to look at what's exportable as well and what sort of workforce we want so that we can attract investment. That's what the comment is centered around. But I will clarify for you, as of today, we're funding every single course that's available in the public space of tertiary institutions, universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. We are not discriminating against any course, and we will not do that without proper consultation, proper research, and proper understanding about what's going to move our nation forward and what's going to give people a realistic chance of being able to pay back whatever loans they have. We are a responsible lender at NELFund.
This speaks to the issue of review of our curriculum by extension, but I know that's not that's not what you're interested in necessarily. Or not. Let me rephrase. That's not exactly what the fund is meant for. The people that are reviewing that will review that, but it can give them a guide as to this. So as we begin to wind down, two quick questions. Maybe answer it in one fell swoop. The challenges so far you've witnessed with this scheme, haven't managed it for this long, and possibly let's project into 2025. What exactly are we looking at? Right now, you say we have about 23 billion to 94,000 students. Please correct me if my facts are not correct. By 2025, this time, what should we be looking at in terms of disbursement and size of benefiting institution or benefiting students in 2025?
So, look, by 2025, we aim to have at least 1.2 million students on the loan scheme. That basically means that we would have covered the majority of students in tertiary institutions that are publicly owned who may wish to take the loan. Our estimate and our target is about 1.2 million. In terms of disbursements, we're going to have to look very closely at what this means in terms of fees. We're going to have to look very closely, for example, at what we need to be paying a stipend. Today it's 20,000 naira. I suspect that it will have to go up next year. So we're yet to sort of do that computation of what the numbers will really look like. And I don't want to commit myself to disbursement numbers other than to say 1.2 million students is our target. I think the other thing I should point out to you is that we also have the mandate for skills development. So we are also targeting in 2025 the position where we would have commenced our vocational training support scheme, where we're going to be providing Nigerians who perhaps don't have an academic bent, but are very strong with their creative skills to help them with getting the right sort of teaching, the right sort of coaching, the right sorts of qualifications to be able to do and participate in the real economy here, where most of the people reside, which is in helping using their hands and their ability to use tools to develop the economy. Now, that's a huge area. There's a lot more to do there, a lot more budget and funding to be made there, and we're going to be focusing on that next year. But I can't give you a figure on that now because we're going through a period of just consultation and trying to understand what the numbers look like and what the skill sets that we need to move Nigeria forward looks like, so that we can begin to really invest intelligently there, not just sort of following a cliched approach.
Mr. Akintunde Sawyer, again, we're going to have this conversation some other time. But it's your check-in portal as to the progress that NELFund has made, because it's important to the future of Nigeria. And this is why we are always talking to people like you to ensure that our students who can benefit from this benefit as efficiently and effectively as possible. Akintunde Sawyer is the Managing Director of Nigeria Education Loan Fund. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on the program. And I look forward to the next round of discussion with you. It's important that we keep Nigerians updated as to what we're doing. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, we will take a quick break. When we come back, there's been a lot of issues that has to do with human rights. People have said a lot concerning the issue of Dele Farotimi's case. Was his rights violated or not? There are also issues of the spokesperson of the Nigerian police. I'm talking about Muyiwa Adejobi engaging some people online, talking about insult and raining curses being, a justiciable offense. We're going to get a lawyer to make sense of the situation. And that will be after this break. Join us again. Welcome back. Let's talk about human rights issues. What latitude the Constitution provides and what the limit of those rights. And there's been a lot of talk concerning the issue of Dele Farotimi, which has generated public interest, some for and against. Others have said Are Afe Babalola has built his career for 60 years. He's 95 years old, And this case is more like looking at him writing his history from the very end, which he has to defend himself. The issue about defamation being whether a criminal or civil case, as is provided in Nigeria, is also the issue of 3 states decriminalizing defamation, including Lagos, Edo, and we understand Ekiti. So there's been a lot. Without trying to get into the merits of the case, that is left for the judges to decide. We just want to look around the issues of human rights and whether there were abuses or breach of those rights as well. Picking back on Dele Farotumi's case, as well as some arrests that have been made recently by the police and some persons cursing or using threatening or literally, in the words of the police, inciting people to attack the police. So as much as time will allow us, we'll look at all of this. We're being joined in the program by a legal practitioner, Mr. Michael Ajay. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Ajay, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Pleasure's mine, sir.
So maybe help us clarify this issue of defamation, criminal and civil defamation, because the criminal code, at least in the southern part of the country, provides for that. Because sometimes people are a bit not sure or what the law says. So you are the legal practitioner here. So what is civil and criminal defamation, and what is the implication of all of this as provided in the law?
Yeah, so defamation is can be approached in 2 folds, the criminal and the civil, like you rightly said. The penal code and the criminal code, respectively, have made provisions criminalizing issues of defamation. Where that occurs, the criminal legal system would take its course. Now, for civil defamation, the person who is defamed has a right to approach the court for damages or seek redress in tort. So that is basically the difference. For criminal, the person who perpetrated the defamatory conduct would be arraigned before the court and go through all the gamut of criminal prosecution and all of that. So the criminal code and the penal code have respectively made ample provisions with regards to that. So basically, one, you would seek civil claims in the court for damages, for example, and all of that. And the thing is that you would wonder why people would not even prefer to go to make a civil claim where you can make claims for millions of naira and all of that. Why would they prefer to go for the criminal prosecution of defamatory issues? So I think that is left for us to assess. Thank you.
Okay, so let's look at because I'm trying my best as a lawyer. You're the legal practitioner. You know that we can't speak to the merit of the case because it's subject under adjudication. We're just looking at the peripheral issues here. One of the issues that was raised, I was listening to a senior lawyer, and he talked about the fact that the magistrate court, now talking about the Dele Farotumi's case, the magistrate court is a court of summary jurisdiction, while the other courts above it are courts of records. By implication, if I understand what he's trying to say, he's saying that, look, the issue of bail and on that premise is what he was questioning as to why the magistrate had to ask for a written bail for Dele Farotumi because it's a court of summary jurisdiction. I would like you to speak to that. And he also cited the fact that there are simple offenses, there are misdemeanors, and there are felonies. And this, at its best, may be a misdemeanor. It doesn't require some of the stringent measures, in his view, of what is required. And this maybe speaks to a level of high-handedness, allegedly. What's your view?
Yeah, so the judges have discretionary power, wide discretionary powers to hand down their judgment. So the case would be treated as a misdemeanor, but in terms of bail, facts must be put into consideration. So because the judges have the discretionary powers to admit somebody to bail or not, and also on what circumstances, what conditions should the person be admitted to bail. Now, the court would be considering proximity to where the person stays. For example, if he stays outside of the state, of course, possibility of the person coming back would also be a consideration. Possibility of having this alleged offense continuing, and the impact would also be another consideration. So the issue here is whether the discretion of the judge was exercised lawfully and all of that. You cannot question the discretion. That's why it's called the discretionary powers. So having considered all the facts placed before the judge, he would determine what is best. So that's the difference between taking a look at this circumstance from a legal standpoint and from a non-legal view. So those surrounding circumstances, the frequency of this offense, and whether the person is even repentant, whether the person is living within the jurisdiction of the court, and several other things are part of the considerations that the judge would must have taken cognizance of in delivering that the ruling for bail.
So are you saying that despite being a court, an inferior court and a court of summary jurisdiction, the judge has a right to ask for a written bail application? I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yes, nothing is actually stopping the court. Like I told you, the discretionary powers of the court is so enormous. He has the discretion to even refuse the bail, even if the law says this particular offense is bailable. Now the court would take into cognizance surrounding circumstances, like I said, and would those would inform the judgment, the mind, the decisions of the court. So the court is still within its right to say we need a written bail application. So it's left for the lawyers to argue whether a written application could be dispensed with. But as far as it was the pronouncement of the court, they would really have limits to what they can do. The best that anybody can do in the circumstance would be to proceed on appeal if they felt that the circumstances or the conditions for bail were enormous.
I'm going to move on from that in a moment, but I understand that issues around bail, you guide me if I'm wrong as a lawyer, it has to do with both policy and legal issue, given the fact that judicial prisons are overcrowded, and the infrastructure, we need to be able to hold them. So they want to hold the right set of people, not just simple offense or misdemeanor that at maximum maybe 2 years imprisonment and all of that if they are found guilty. So that's why perhaps they said it's an issue of policy as well. Maybe you can comment on that. But moving on, there's this issue online that has been causing this back and forth between the spokesperson of the police, Muyiwa Adejobi, and he talked about, in fact, that raining curses on someone is an offense. I think he called it cyberbullying. I've forgotten how he referenced it. And that, I think somebody has even been taken into custody to that effect. I think from cursing the IGP, the president, or the president's son and himself and all of that. Cursing, first, is that still within our law? Because there was an argument that that part has been repealed. So help me out, has it been repealed too? How justiciable is cursing someone? Because even some of us, people curse us online. Just help us out here.
Yeah, so I have read, I've read on Twitter, most of those conversations and the comments that people have made and all of that. Now, it's just opposition of Section 39 of the Constitution, which provides for the freedom of expression and the freedom to hold opinion, and Section 24B of the Cybercrimes Act is where the problem is actually. Now, the Constitution, which is the ground, which is superior, had made provision empowering Nigerians to freely express themselves and to also hold, to have that freedom of thought, conscience, and all of that. But now the National Assembly also made the Cyber Crimes Act, which in Section 24B had made provisions tending to qualify or restrict the position of the Constitution. Now, in the Cyber Crimes Act, like I talked about, that Section 24B has provided that where somebody makes inflammatory comments, whether they are insults or comments intentionally or knowingly, knowing that those would, cause damage, create unrest and all of that, the person would, upon conviction, there's a penalty for 7 million and 3 years imprisonment. Now, there's a law actually, and that is what is informing this new dimension of of gagging people, especially on the social media. Now, where the problem is and where the problem should be addressed actually really is the legislature. The legislature should take a look at this law again and see whether this law needs amendment. Now, if I to share a personal opinion, I would want to say, okay, does this law is this inconsistent with the provisions of Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution? And where the court finds that inconsistency, it will automatically be null and void. So that will be an assignment for people, activists, lawyers, and civil society organizations and all to approach the court and say, this Section 24B, we need an interpretation. We need to know whether it's inconsistent with Section 39 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999. Thank you.
So are you saying by your submission, you have a feeling that Section 24B of the Cyber Crimes Act, I wish I could get to it, is perhaps in conflict with Section 39 of the Constitution that gives that liberty to freely express oneself, juxtaposing it with Section 45 that gives latitude, the level of latitude someone has to the freedom of whatever freedom you choose to have?
Yeah, that's a point. It's only the court actually that can make that pronouncement. But I mean, for me, I would say, can the Cyber Crimes Act, which is an inferior legislation, can it qualify the provision of the Constitution itself? If the Constitution has provided that it is supreme and every other law that is, inconsistent with it is null and void. Now, the question right now is the Constitution has provided, Constitution and international conventions and all that, and law have made ample provisions for the freedom and civil liberties of people, right to freely express themselves, right to freedom of assembly, right to hold thoughts, opinion, religion, and all of that. Now, if the Cyber Crimes Act appears to gag it, appears to qualify it, appears to be inconsistent with the provision of the the 1999 Constitution, then it's a responsibility for all of us, civil society, as well as citizens, to approach the court for a just determination. Thank you.
Because a lot of people will see this as draconian. I've been able to get to the provision of the law. I wish I could put it up, but I don't have it up. But let me read the Section 24 says, a person who knowingly or intentionally sends a message or other matter by means of computer systems or network that in B says he knows to be false for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, danger, obstruction, insult, injury, criminal intimidation, enmity, hatred, ill will, or endless anxiety to another, and cause such a message to be sent, commits an offense under this act and is liable on conviction to a fine of no more than 7 million naira, imprisonment for a term of no more than 3 years, or both. How do you qualify insult or needless anxiety? because some of the words used here, you are the lawyers, wind down. How do you qualify? If I go to a judge and say I've been, how do you qualify that to send somebody to jail for pay 7 million naira?
Yeah, so where you read in section 24, 24A talks about whether the person intends, whether he knows, that the information that he or she is passing or resending or retweeting is capable or is false, is capable of misleading, and all of that. Whether the person even knows that that particular information is capable of being injurious to the other person. So the onus of proof actually lies with the prosecution. And that is where, the defense, would come in. So how can you say that the person knows? Have you done, a mental evaluation? Have you done forensic examinations and some other, factors to justify, to know with certainty that this person knew, per time that the information was false or the information was capable of causing annoyance and all of that. So I think that is where the legal battles would, begin.
Okay. I'm going to look at this, and we're going to walk and talk about this a lot more, because if not, we're going to see all kinds of litigation. And our worry as media professionals is that we don't want people to rely on some of these provisions of the law to begin to gag people to express themselves, as much as we know people must be responsible for their action and act responsibly. But we must thank you, Mr. Michael Eje, legal practitioner, joining us from Abuja today. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
And that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Have yourself a beautiful night. Bye-bye.